Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Salam Islamic Center weekly Seerah Series. Just a friendly reminder, especially for our new audience, we're reading and following The Messenger of God by Fethullah Gülen every Tuesday at 6 p.m. And today's topic is Communication and Intellect, Prophets Communicated with Intellect, chapter number 4. We actually started this topic last week and we'll continue with the second half of this chapter again together with Dr. Yasir Bilgin. Dr. Bilgin, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Hello, Seerah. Thank you for having me. Last week, this week I want to start to remind ourselves what did we talk last week, just to give the context of the whole topic. So I'll just touch briefly some key points from last week and continue the rest of the topic. So as you remember, last week we just talked the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, part of a historical and global tradition. It's not someone who is just emerging by himself, totally new, totally innovative. It is a part of a voice that is echoing throughout the human history, which is that prophetic line. And as he described himself, he's the final and completing brick of the building of wisdom, constituted by former messengers and sages. But after him, as the final messenger, we see that a certain level of inspiration still revealing and coming, but not as authoritative as the revelation. And also people come together as a collective mind called ijma or other consensuses and make decisions. So that sort of connection, divine connection, inspiration, which is called ilham in the Islamic tradition, still continues. But it does not bind other people and not authoritative as the wahi. And also, I just try to emphasize that I'm going to focus on 5 topics, which is the content of the Prophet, the message of the Prophet Muhammad when he is making his tabligh, the communication, and the context that he emerged, and also the audience that he just speak. And also his manner and methodology when he is sharing and conveying his message. So in terms of content, we focus the major themes of the Quran, which is the first one is the divine unity, that one God who created the universe and one big universe governed by a set of rules called Sunnatullah, and everything somehow pointing to the same center, same focus that we call Allah. And also as God creating this universe and sending us, creating us in this part of the universe, in this corner of the universe. And we need certain guidance and orientation as anyone who goes a new institution, a university, a company, when they start, working and getting education, they got sort of an education, guidance, instructions from others, and just sending and throwing someone and then not even giving them any instruction is not compatible with the wisdom and waste of the energy investment and sources of the universe, right? Huge investment to the universe, and maybe the most important fruit of this universe as the human being with its conscience and other faculties, but just left alone without any guidance is incompatible according to Islamic theology with God's wisdom, knowledge, and will. So the third one is the third main message that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, convey as his is the beauty of existence, which is the afterlife. And mostly we think of the afterlife like very certain stages of the death and then resurrection and then the hashar, that all coming together, and also some judgment. And we tend to think them as if in 1 year all of them will happen and everything is done. But we can think of them as the huge, very large processes. Like when we talk about human creation, and when we look at the Quran, it says just we said be and the universe happen. But when you look at the universe, it takes like 13 billion years to come to this stage, like a point. But when we just look at the sayings of the Quran as if it's like happened all of a sudden. Similarly, we can think of the stages of the afterlife as long periods rather than just happening all of once. So because we are talking about an eternal journey, so you cannot define eternity, right, from this here and that. So it's just a continuous unfolding of that potential. So Quran pointing to that reality as the key message, and the Prophet Muhammad as well. And the other one is the provision of justice. Everything is created in the universe according to some rules and also some measures. And eventually anything that is violating that balance will be judged and also given to its proper judgment and balance. And finally, our final and ultimate goals as human beings are commitment to the divine service with our own will and choice. That's the invitation of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. And the other thing that what is the key message, core of the messages, not only in the Prophet Muhammad, but also other people, them all. It is building and preserving the presence of God. That's and how can we make that connection, that divine encounter, and keep that presence, which creates the peace, salam, or the shalom, or that integrity, that inner peace and harmony with the rest of the universe. So all the regulations or the sharia or other like halakha, many regulations and the rules, the main essence and the purpose of all of them keep that state of purity, that state of qudus, which is the blessedness, and keep that connection with God. So all of those like 5 daily prayers, fasting, and then other practices are main purposes, preserving and making these connections. And finally, as the content of the message of the Prophet Muhammad was the big questions of life, like what is the meaning of my life? What is my purpose individually? Why I am here? Or what is my destiny? What happened after this life? Or what the justice, the question of justice, question of good life. What is the good life? And what is a good society? And how can we describe it? And also strive to build that sort of society and life. And also, what is my ideal state of being? So these are some of the big questions that either the Quranic message or the prophetic message try to address. And also we talk about briefly the context and the audience of the tabligh, the conveying the message of the Prophet Muhammad. And we mentioned the practices, mindset, conditions, and moral decline in Arab society right before the bi'sa, or the coming of the Prophet Muhammad. And finally, we talk about the term kufr, which is the when the farmer is covering the seed, when after planting the seed, covering and make it invisible. But the meaning that is used in the Quran is each of us as the part of the creation is the mirror of the divine manifestations. And when we look at our being or anyone else's being, we can observe God's manifestations, names, and signature on all those mirrors. But as a mirror, if I, rather than reflecting and saying, when someone look at me, clearly see those owner of those manifestations, oh, I see God in your mirror. That's his signature, and this is the citation that's referring to him. But instead, if I say and claim ownership, no, those are mine. I made them. If I just own and claim ownership, this is kind of covering the visibility of God and making him invisible in my mirror. That's the sort of like owning and observing the light and not reflecting back. So that's the kind of essence of the kufr that is mostly describing the people of the Mecca at that time, or the mushrik who are associating partners to God. And finally, the final challenge of the Prophet Muhammad when he is speaking to his audience is the how to turn this transient life into a meaningful school of spiritual training, as an analogy, or an exhibit of God's divine manifestations that we observe in the face of everything, or a garden planted with good deeds and faith to be harvested in the next stages of eternal life. So that was the kind of challenge of the Prophet Muhammad. How can I embedded those meanings, those vision in the minds and hearts of the people, so they can live their lives more meaningfully and purposefully. So that was the main message, and also these were the content, context, and audience briefly that I mentioned last week when the Prophet Muhammad making his mission of Tabligh. But when he is doing this, or any other prophets, like we are talking about those attributes of the prophets in general, and the Prophet Muhammad in particular, what is the role of his personhood, turning this transient life into a meaningful, purposeful life, and how this message was received by his contemporaries, by his companions or other people. I will just touch briefly to them. So in his, the prophets, we see exemplary life. People can find inspiration or direction and meaning in their life, in their words, in their attitudes and manners. So they function like, imaginatively, like lighthouses, enlightening ages, like ages. So after 14 centuries, still we can see those lights, and we can enlighten our personal lives through those lights. And with their timeless presence and messages, they serve as guides and role models for newcomers to this earth, like as newcomers or the new enrolls to this school of university, to the earth. They are making this guidance and orientation. Of course, this sort of guidance and instruction requires certain attitudes. They can understand the meaning of this realm very well compared to us. And they convey their core messages and rules to people, and they can demonstrate the qualities of an ideal visitor, because we will just look at them and then imitate them, and then turn our questions and concerns to them, so they respond in a way that will convince our minds and hearts. And also they connect like a bridge between both the creator and the creation, and they demonstrate the traits and attitudes befitting to a wise journey. But when he is sharing his message, especially in his contemporaries, we as the people coming after centuries, maybe sometimes we are idealizing the Prophet Muhammad like any other figure in the history. So it is for us hard to see him like as normal human being, because after centuries we just idealize his image. But the people in his time who knows him from childhood, they know him in his daily interactions. Sometimes they visit him, they see his own human. Sometimes if he has some mistakes or shortcomings, they observe them, right? All of a sudden someone emerges and says, you know me, and from now on I have some responsibilities, and I am a messenger, and I will convey the message and the divine will to you as much as possible. First of all, I will try to follow it like first as my main mission. So when he comes and shares his message, a very good example of that, how that message was conceived and received by his contemporaries, is the conversation between the first emigres, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad before Medina, he sent a group of companions to Abyssinia, like Ethiopia of today. That group went, and then the mushriks, the Meccans, chased them, and then they wanted them back from the Negus of the Ethiopia. And when the Negus, listening both sides, he asked the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, what was the religion for which they that you had forsaken your people, and without entering either like Christianity or other religion? What was the reason that's so compelling to you? So their representative was Ja'far bin Abi Talib, which is the brother of Ali bin Abi Talib, and both of them children of Abu Talib, which is the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. His response is very interesting. This is the Mecca time, right? All of this conversation before the Medina time. So they don't know the Islamic polity. They don't know when the Islam become a government, like a state. They only know the Prophet Muhammad as a messenger conveying his message, and also trying to do something good for his own society. Okay? So he doesn't have any political power, any military power, a person who is struggling to contribute to his society. So their response is interesting. They say, Ja'far says as a representative, we were an uncivilized people. God sent us an apostle who commanded us to speak the truth, be faithful to our engagements. When we make a commitment, just, keep your promise and keep your commitment. Be mindful of the ties of kinship and kindly hospitality, which is very important values in the Arabic society. And Islam did not abandon them. On the opposite, when there was a moral decline in the society, even they were like non-Muslims at that time. So Islam is restoring those moral values rather than totally rejecting them. Those are good values. And also another thing is to refrain from crimes and bloodshed, which we see a lot when those tribes like clash each other and the feuds ongoing, even the tribe of the Prophet Muhammad before the prophethood. And that was the main reason that the Prophet Muhammad was invited to Medina, right? That was the reason. You will act as an arbitrator to solve our computes, our clashes between two tribes. That was the reason he was invited to Medina. So the other thing is, he forbade us to commit abominations and to speak lies and to devour the property of orphans, to vilify chaste women. When you look at especially like early messages of Quran, a lot of emphasis on protecting the orphans, not killing the children because the fear of hunger or the humility, and also not vilifying chaste women, which that was a common thing at that time. So those moral declines we see in the society, that Quran and the Prophet Muhammad fighting against and restoring a most virtuous and moral society. And he continues, he commanded us to worship God alone instead of many other idols, and not to associate anything with him. And he gave us orders about prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and other things that he mentioned. And finally, this one is very important. So we believed in him. So he mentioned like that amen, which is iman or the mu'min, like those words. The Muslim is different, mu'min is different. Muslim, someone who is submitting to will of God, saying that, God, I know you are the God, and I am your creation, and I just submit as much as possible with the will, to follow your will, and to be your servant. Whether I understand and internalize those values, things or not, but I will just fight for it. I do my best for it. But iman, which comes as a word, that it just really deeply established in your heart. And that best image that can describe us is when the babies let's say, yeah, imagine a very small baby, right? In the shoulders of the mother. Even the baby is in a crowded area, a lot of like noises. And when the baby needs to sleep, just sleeps at that moment, right? All the like noises or the other do not distract the person. Just imagine yourself in that environment. Can you sleep? And what makes the baby just easily fall asleep in the shoulders of mother, right? That trust relationship, that just the mother just holding and then kind of in a safe environment. That sort of safety, that sort of trust to that caregiver easily make the baby just fall asleep because he will not distracted or feel protected right at that moment. So the iman comes from that sort of relationship. So like the baby, you are trusting your caregiver, which is the God, and totally it is established in your heart, that sort of trust and that sort of connection. So they say, first of all, we trusted him. Before the Quran, before the other things, they said we trusted in his person. So all of these changes and transformations in the society and in the person start with that trusting with someone else. And after that, their perceptions are opening. And the best teachers are mothers. Why? Because they are scholars? Is it because they are scholars best now? No, they are not, for many cases. But for the kids, the knowledge that they learn from mother is they never forget it. Why? Because that trust relationship, like that compassion. So when you see that sort of compassion and trust in someone, then your perceptions start opening and listening. So similarly, we see them first, we believed in him and what he brought to us from Allah. That's the second, following that trust relationship, which is the key signature and then the key characteristic of the Prophet Muhammadul Amin. Everyone trusts, which is the coming from Iman and Amin and Mu'min. All of them are coming from the same root, that sort of trust relationship. After that, that Iman, that faith flourish and establish in people's hearts. And we follow what he asked us to do, and we avoid what he forbade us to do. So that's the kind of how that message, without any power, without any force, that was the project of the Prophet Muhammad. That was the Quran together, how to restore that society on sound foundations, and also protecting the woman, the poor, the one who is oppressed, all of those, and how to restore the justice within the society. So that's made the early community of Islam so much attracted to Prophet Muhammad. So the other attitude that I want to mention about the Prophet Muhammad is in his efforts of the tabligh is his manner and methodology when he is doing this. When we ask what is the best way of communicating, right? There are I was searching the 7 C's, like the clarity of your message, for example. Make it very effective, your message and the communication. Concise, rather than just long sentences or it's very concise, very, very clear, and then short messages. And correctness, build on facts and then the correct knowledge. Another is the complete, which is convey all the facts required by the receiver, right? Leaving no space for the curious mind. And the consideration, which is considering the audience and their requirements, rather than just speaking everyone equally. It's just considering their levels and then the diversity of that audience. And be concrete, define and being a defined and a definite and specific, not vague language. And then finally, the courtesy, thinking about the receiver, their viewpoint, and be respectful to their perception, rather than just forcing the message. A dialogue, like conversation between these conveyor and then the receiver. So when we look at the Prophet Muhammad in his attitudes and methodology, there are like few points just shining. The first one is comprehensiveness and in his communication, and a holistic nature of his teachings when he communicates, and sort of a holistic teaching methodology when he is conveying this message. In a sense, how to diversify the communication methods and application of the message to my audience. That was the first one. The second one is his perseverance and consistency in his efforts of tabligh. I mean, the preserving his initial passion in that 23 years, and he's keeping his focus to his main message, and also his moral integrity, which is the most difficult one. When people start very compassionately, very passionately to their mission, after some successes and building some respect in the society, maybe some wealth, some positions within the society, they start losing their moral integrity because of those pressures of the fame, pressures of earthly benefits, all of those. Keeping the moral integrity and personal integrity is a very difficult job, especially in the height of your success and career, the career. We see the Prophet Muhammad preserve that passion, focus, and moral integrity. The other point is no personal or earthly favors or expectations from the audience, rather than I will teach you and then you will give me this. No, it's just, this is my role, and this is my mission, and this is my passion, and I am a kind of an employed by God. So you will not, in a sense, this is not your responsibility to take care of me. So God will take care of me, and I will do my responsibilities with my best effort. So we see that the term ikhlas, which is the purity of intention only for the sake of God in his communication. And also we don't know what is the kind of nature of transaction between God and the prophets in return his efforts or his servanthood to God. That spiritual satisfaction and reward. And the final point is, rather than dictating his will or their will as the prophets and forcing the expected change, he fulfills his responsibilities and doing his best, and then leaving the results to God. Right? This is my responsibility. This is my job description, and I will do my best, but I will not dictate the end results. That's in the hands of God. But it doesn't mean fatalistically I will just wait and then God will do everything for me. No, I will do my responsibility, and at the end I just pray and then wait for God's final decree. So these are the key points. So I will just give some examples or more explanation in terms of comprehensive methodology of communication. Last week, you asked the question of the Prophet Muhammad is aiming the intellect of people, right? Convincing their rational mind and convincing their mind. When we talk about that intellect and then their mind, there are contemporary theories about intelligences. Like there are the multiple intelligences. Some people are body smart, like they have very good physical skills and smartness in a sense. Some people are people smart, very successful in the interpersonal communication and relations. No one can do their diplomacy or like building friendship as they do. Some people are word smart, very good in verbal and linguistic abilities. Some people are logic smart. They can see that logical faults and defaults. And then some people are nature smart. They can feel, sense the nature. They just dance with the nature, understand the language, the voice of the nature. Some people are self-smart. They can very well, observe themselves, their heart, their mind, their the faculties, and make out of those observations great explanations and identify some patterns. Some people are picture smart. They are very good as the visual or the spatial aspects of life. Some people are musical smart. They can hear the music, right? There are many different intelligences. So when we, consider the methodology of the Prophet Muhammad when he is conveying his message, he is diversifying his message. He do not give the same message, everyone in the same manner. He is changing the tone, the emphasis, the way he presents something according to his audience, individual audiences. So without considering that sort of framework, it is very hard to understand. Someone coming to the Prophet Muhammad, for example, says, "Oh Prophet Muhammad, advise me something that if I practice, it leads me to the heaven or the presence of God." And he says, just fast as much as possible, Mondays and the Thursdays. Someone else comes asking exactly the same question, and then he says, go and do good deeds for your mom. Right? And someone else comes and then asks exactly the same question and says, do not ask anything from other people. Do your jobs by yourself. So it is changing. Why? And how he can read the needs of the people or the way that they are smart, and then aiming that sort of intellect that is more shining in that person. So this is one way that he is diversifying his message. The second one is very well expressed by Gary Thomas, which he is describing the sacred pathways. There is many ways that lead us to God, that presence, that connection with Allah. One of them is, some of us are naturalists, right? Very good at outdoors. We can see and feel the presence of God in the woods, in the ocean, when we hear the birds. That presence just really convey us that there is a serenity, there is a presence here, that hudur, that connection. And some people are ascetics. They find God in solitude and simplicity. When they just be themselves and by themselves and then just hear their own hearts and then the minds, they can just touch and then connect with God. Some other people are sensates. With their senses, they appreciate beauty. They involve with their sights, taste, smell, touch, and ears. When they do those things with their senses, they can just connect with God through the art, for example, through making something. They find that connection and tranquility in that presence. And some people are traditionalists. They like rituals. They like liturgies. They like symbols. They like unchanging structures. They can find God's voice, God's presence in those old buildings, old mosques and worship houses, or when they imitate what their parents, what their elders do. So that's their way of finding God. And some other people are contemplatives through adoration, which is tafakkur, right? They just, and an hour of contemplation is better than 70 years of worship in one of the saying of the Prophet Muhammad. By making connections, by observing everything around them, and finding ways to connect God. So that's their way of speaking to God and feeling His presence in their lives. And other people are enthusiasts through celebration, through joy, and then through singings, through hymns, the festivals, they saying Alhamdulillah, or just making those singings, they find as a group or as a huge, people in Mecca all together saying Allahu Akbar, like that's their way of feeling God's presence in the crowds, but all together when they joyfully celebrate something. Or some peoples are activists. They want to confront with evil. They want to battle with against that injustices and restore the justice in the society. That's their struggle. And when they just restore a justice in the society, and then when they repair a broken heart, when they do something with their hands to restore that a better society, they feel the presence of God in that action, right? And some other people are caregivers. When they just care and love other people and meet their needs, and then when someone cries, they just sit and cry with them, that's the place, they find the presence of God next to the poor, next to the broken heart. So by mending and by repairing those hearts, that is the closest moment that they can feel the God's presence. And finally, intellectuals, they, by studying their minds, they try to find patterns in the universe, and they try to discover laws governing the universe, which we call Sunnatullah. And then by discovering those laws, universal laws, through physics, through chemistry, or other social sciences, when they find those patterns in Sunnatullah that God governed the universe through, they just feel connected and they just appreciate God's power and majesty through those studies. So as we see, there are many diverse group and audiences that every people are different in their finding a way to God, to encounter with Him. So as a messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, or anyone who is coming after them and then trying to do what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, do, they need to consider these categories of people, these needs of people, and how do they appreciate and how do they understand the presence of God. If someone like a very activist, if you say that an activist person, let's come and stay alone here few hours, they cannot stay in that solitude. They should go and then do something, right? So the Prophet Muhammad was observing those people, their needs and their kind of nature, which is called fitra, right? That nature, and then accordingly he was giving a way, an environment, and the way that they can connect with God, Allah, peace be, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And other things in terms of his perseverance and consistency. There is a very good theoretical framework that I like very much, which is written by Edwin Friedman in the book of A Failure of Nerve. He just described a self-differentiated leadership in 5 items. The first one is the capacity of the leader to separate himself or herself from surrounding emotional processes. There are many ups and downs around us emotionally, and the way that we are just following those emotions and losing control of ourselves, or even though there is emotionally very tense environment, still we can think clearly without being defeated by our desires or the passions. The second feature is their capacity to obtain clarity about their principles and vision. So what is those principles and vision that is governing their life? Very clearly they can explain. And the third one is the willingness to be exposed and to be vulnerable. Rather than I am God-like person, no mistakes, no faults, I am perfect. No, I am human. Like the description of the Prophet Muhammad, a mu'min is like the plant, I couldn't remember, the plant that when the wind comes, blows, and then it's just blow down and then just comes back, and then the bend down and then comes back. rather than just like big trees staying always straight. No, the life makes us vulnerable, and we have sometimes shortcomings and the mistakes, and facing and accepting those is one of the characteristics of that leadership. And then the other one is the persistence to face the inertial resistance. When people just reject, when people are lazy, and when they just do not listen, do we consistently share our message? And finally, that self-regulation of emotions in the face of reactive sabotage. When they just humiliate us, when someone humiliates us, when we share our message, like the Prophet Muhammad, when he goes to Taif, the kids like stone him, right? In that moment, can he, like, that's a sabotage, emotional sabotage, how he restores himself back. Or in the case of, like, in the last week, in the Uhud, when he see many people dying among his companions, and the other companions come, they say, please, like, pray to God so he can punish them. And he says, no, I will not do it, because they do not know, who am I and what is my message. So how he can separate his emotions and his just very sound thinking and his principles at that moment, which is very difficult. And the best example for that is the example of Wahshi. The Wahshi is the person who was hired during the Battle of Uhud by the Meccans. And his mission was to find the Prophet Muhammad and then his uncle Hamza and another person, and specifically kill those three people. And that was his mission. And he succeeded killing Hamza at the battlefield. Then after that, they just as part of Jahiliyyah of the Meccan tradition, they just mutilated his body parts, just cut the body parts to humiliate the person. So that was a very shocking. The Prophet Muhammad's uncle, and also his Hamza, was a protector of the Muslim community, so he was killed in that way. And after years, the Muslims returned to the Medina. And then they get stronger and stronger. And eventually, they came to Medina and they conquered the Medina. Just imagine yourself as, the Prophet Muhammad in his peak of his power, who is the master of Mecca and Medina now. And he is surrounded by people, his companions, that very like him, respect him, and do whatever he wants. So in that environment, like many of us, like remembering those feelings that someone very closest to you and many people killed, and then that feelings of revenge, those feelings of anger, right, normally come to us, and then we expect him to, like, catch that person and punish that person. What he does at the peak of his power, that he can do anything at that moment, he writes letters to Wahshi, and then inviting him and saying, Wahshi, come and become Muslim and embrace the message of Islam and just find the peace and the salam by following this sort of lifestyle. And then if you have any regrets and any shortcomings, any problems in your life, and come and embrace Islam and change your lifestyle and become a full person again. That's the invitation. And the shock of the Wahshi was, why he is inviting me? I did this to him, but still he is inviting me. And then there was a kind of exchange of letters. He says, no, I am a very wicked person. I don't think God will accept me. I don't think he will, forgive my sins. And then the Prophet, just come and depend, and they will accept you. And in his final message, the Prophet Muhammad sends him a verse from the Quran. It says, O my servants who have transgressed against their souls, do not despair of the mercy of God. God forgives all sins, and he is the oft forgiving and most compassionate. So after this, he comes and he becomes Muslims, and then join the circle and fellowship of the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, that image, especially, I mean, just considering our own weaknesses and our shortcomings, this is very difficult decision, and this is very difficult manner to preserve in the face of those emotional pressures. And other examples that our author giving, illustrating those characteristics of the prophets, one of them is the complaint of the prophet Noah to God. We see that and then hear it in the Quran. When he just make this da'wah, which is the tabligh to other people, conveying God's message and then inviting them to this message, he do it like for years. According to the Quran, he died in after like almost like 1,000 years he lives, and then that's his mission for 900 more year. And then his complaint to God, "Oh my Lord, day and night I have called my people, but my call has only added to their aversion. Every time I call on them to seek your pardon, come people, and then restore your connection with God, and then just join his presence and then enjoy that hudur or the presence, they thrust their fingers in their ears and cover themselves with their garments, persisting in sin and magnifying themselves in insolent pride. No, we don't need your advice. We do what we are gonna do, and we are fine. We are fine." So that's sort of like covering. That's sort of by covering their bodies, in a sense, they are covering their shortcomings as well, and making it invisible rather than honestly exposing their vulnerabilities. They are just creating a wall around themselves, and they are saying, "No, we are living in these castles and we do not need mercy. We are strong and we are just people who can survive and do whatever they want." So that sort of attitude that the prophet Noah faced throughout his prophetic mission, but his insistence and his consistency of like sharing the message, we see as an excellent example. And finally, when the Uhud battle was very severely affected the Muslims, and other people around the Prophet Muhammad asked him to pray God to save them and punish their enemies. He asked instead forgiveness for those people. And then the Quran, a response of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad, when in the face of his compassion, in the face of his like struggle and passion to embrace people, to share that compassion with them, the Quran says, "Then perhaps you would kill yourself through grief over them, O Muhammad, if they do not believe in this message, and out of sorrow you just kill yourself." That sort of attitude we see in the Prophet Muhammad and many other prophets as well. So just summarizing, there are many other types of intellects, and the prophets, when they say that intellect, discovering the need of the person and discovering their strengths and weaknesses and sharing his message accordingly, and struggling to restore that person's dignity, and also reconnecting that person with God, that source of spirituality. That was a struggle of the Prophet Muhammad throughout his prophetic mission in his tabligh. And he did his best in terms of preachers, and also not exchanging his efforts with earthly expectations or earthly benefits and the prophets. So this was what we see in the example of the Prophet Muhammad. So I will stop here, and if there is any questions or comments, I try to address. But otherwise, this is end of my presentation. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the insightful talk, Dr. Bilgin. So we have a question, actually a couple of questions about today's topic. So our first question is, to what questions can we find answers and finding solutions to our problems of the society that we live in? From the example of some companions migrating to Abyssinia and Ja'far Abu Talib's answers to Negus, the king of Abyssinia. So that's our first question.
I guess this is, these are al-muhajirun, we call, muhajir, someone who is emigrating to somewhere which is safer and a place that they can live their religion freely without any pressure or without any concern that someone will interfere or will reject their practices. And the suggestion of the Prophet Muhammad as a safe place, as a safe kind of heaven for the early Muslims is the country of a Christian king, Negus of the Abyssinia. So they just find refuge in his protection, and they just freely practice their religion. Even though they do not, convert to Islam, but in terms of that restoring the human dignity around common messages in their conversations, we say when Ja'far Abu Talib talk about how they perceive the Maryam or how they perceive other prophets, he says, the difference between you and me is like this line. He's just drawing a line, very, very, tiny, fine lines among us, and also that sort of, protection, that sort of in time when we need that, just going them and asking them. We are cousins. We are, same people of the same Abrahamic traditions, and they just gave and provide them that shelter, and just. I am thinking like people of the Muslim faith as well, living in the United States. That was a conversation that we had earlier today. We are doing our programs as the Chicago Hyde Park Turkish Community in a Christian institution here at Lutheran School of Theology. We do iftars, we do Eid celebrations, and they welcome us. They just let us use their space. This is a seminary, which is they just educate and then raise Christian leaders in these institutions. And they just co-host our programs. And they say, we will invite our community. And they come. And they help us, setting the tables, welcoming the guests, and then preparing the food, sharing the food. So I just challenge sometimes my friends, imagine that we have a mosque or we are living in Turkey or dominantly Muslim country and a group of Christians who don't have a worship house, and they said, can we use your mosque for our Easter celebration? And while we are celebrating the Easter, could you invite your community so they can also share, join us when we are celebrating the Easter or, other celebrations? And also, could you help us set up the tables, preparing the food? We can imagine, ourselves that sort of hospitality that we find in these local faith communities is a very good example, I guess, that we can follow. In the example of the Abyssinia, or examples of today faith communities, that many people from other Muslim countries coming and live their religion. We show the similar attitudes and welcoming, and also protections, and providing that sort of safe environment for those people of other faiths. That's my, I guess, challenge and reflection on that historical instance.
Yeah, that was such a nice example and elaboration on that, because yeah, it would be wonderful if we could do the same thing in Turkey, right? And it's nice to see that hospitality from other religions.
Or in other Muslim country, I guess, not only Turkey, also other Muslim countries, let alone, like not only those Muslim countries, but also here, the people like see that sort of welcoming and hospitality. Still, I don't think many mosques are not eager to have that sort of presence in their worship house. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, you're right. So for our question number 2, you mentioned some examples from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his bouncing back and restoring himself from so many traumas that he lived through. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Personally, when we face like those big challenges, those like shocking moments, and our emotional state becomes like upside down, right? All the hormones, all the other things just mix up, and then at that moment we are not a thinking person, we are a feeling person, right? And we are acting out of our emotions most of the time. And there is no limit in emotions. Someone can be very evil and very fall in love, and then see nothing about the person he or she loves, right? That there is no limits in that emotions. So at that very difficult moments, like the Hamza or the loss of the Battle of Uhud, for example, is a very, very good example. Or other moments when someone from the Bedouins, coming from very rural areas of that Arabia, very sometimes uncivilized manners, and then he just holds the clothes of the Prophet Muhammad and just pull back, and then just make some signs in his neck because of harshness of that attitude, and asking some money or asking some other things from the Prophet Muhammad, and then the companions around him very like angry, and then catch the person and punish the person if the Prophet Muhammad led them. But instead he says, calm down. He is the one who is afflicted, but he is the one who is also controlling other people, let alone like himself plus. And also like his connections and his challenges sometimes living within his family, like with his wives, like any other ordinary family, right? All of us, as couples, as like spouses, all of those challenges, besides many his missions and other things, trying to balance and then giving the rights to each sphere of the responsibility, it's a proper right to them. I guess these are some good examples, or someone who is like from the Bedouins as well, coming and in the middle of mosque, just think of the mosque at today's imagination. He is just using the corner of the mosque as a restroom, and then just urinating and other those things at the mosque, because that's what he does probably, or in the parts of the country. So again, the attitudes, and then as a prophet or other means, it is very difficult to be patient. First of all, be patient, be tolerant, be compassionate, and also very wisely be guiding unit at that moment. Without like, even in your attitude, in your face, you will not show those, because that person, when they hear you, they change. If we don't have that sort of very tranquil attitudes, very embracing and very humane attitude, they do not listen us, right? So then we see in the example of the Prophet Muhammad, those attitudes. But he is human. He become angry sometimes, and probably he has some emotional challenges in his life. Otherwise, there is a saying of him. He says, I do astaghfirullah, which is, I seek for pardon or this forgiveness of God 100 times a day. Why he is doing this. And if you don't discover, if you don't observe and then identify a shortcoming in you, why would you say astaghfirullah, right? Otherwise, the Prophet Muhammad would lying, right? If he just say astaghfirullah, but nothing, just I'm saying. It's just, no, he is identifying in himself, maybe not like us, not some like major mistakes or other things, but he is very observant of himself, very kind of sensitive, and then observing and then correcting it, observing, catching, and correcting and continuing. So that's what we see in his example, I guess.
Yeah, maybe that would be a very good solution if we were to like practice such things as like doing this astaghfirullah 100 times a day and overcome our traumas in this respect, like in a better way, right?
Maybe we can add at the end of the astaghfirullah for this, rather than just say astaghfirullah. Because if we cannot find that astaghfirullah for what, then we're just repeating it, chanting it, but we don't think about it.
Exactly.
And then if I say, well, I say astaghfirullah, but I don't find anything for astaghfirullah myself, then we see ourselves perfect, right? We don't see any shortcoming and anything that should be improved in our lives.
Definitely. We always need reminders, specific reminders, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thank you so much. And our last question is, and you mentioned this a little bit, especially at the beginning of your talk. We see a lot of questions in the youth, especially youth today. Just like you said, some questions like, where do I come from? Why am I in this world? Why did I arrive here? Etc. Like philosophical questions. And while seeking answers to these kind of questions, however, there's also a tendency, an inclination, especially in the youth, to end up with the idea of atheism, agnosticism, etc., rather than a religion, or especially in Islam. So why is there this tendency to not believe in a religion while asking all of these questions? Are we too lazy to practice a religion or something? So can we talk about that a little bit?
It is a very challenging question. I mean, I sometimes think about it, and as a family with my wife, we are just, conversing about it, or many, other people thinking about it. And then there is a decline in religion in general in the world. When we see, for example, the surveys numbers in the US, there was the affiliation of a church, for example, or a worship house in 2000, early 2000, around maybe 65%, but now it is like around 50%, someone who is continually attending a church. There is a decline in organized religions, as we say, and following a very particular way of practicing a religion, or a very particular way of connecting to God, finding the presence, and then that presence of God. I guess through the exposure to internet, especially after like 2000, early 2000, people are getting out of their particular societies and communities, from their villages, their towns, or their respected like faith community, which shape their minds and perception of religion, what is right, what is wrong, all of those teachings coming from a very narrow environment, right? But as they expose through the internet, through other like communications, to the larger other religions, other societies. For example, one good example in our society, when there was a survey, which country is the happiest country, right? That was when you look at it, number ones are the Scandinavian countries, which many of them observing religion very less, very minimum level. Atheism is very maybe high, or not. The religion is not very core, or spirituality core part of their beliefs, but they are happy. And then when people are observing and seeing and getting exposed to different cultures, faith traditions, they can see and make the conclusion, oh, people can find well-being, they can find peace, they can find very prosperous, build a prosperous society by adhering other faiths, or by adhering and practicing other cultures and traditions. So my way, my tradition, my teaching is not the only way to create that sort of life, right? So they start questioning their particular teachings, which is sometimes is not compatible with the global standards, which is not very functional in creating a human dignity, a moral society, or other, those traditional practices, not the religion itself, some like some practices. And they conclude that, well, I guess I can find God in a larger context rather than with my own particular interpretation of those global messages and teachings. So I guess they think more open-mindedly, and they just seek other things, and they do not necessarily bind themselves to a very specific teaching, and then search other ways of relating themselves to God. And even if their particular community is oppressing them to connect to God in a very limited ways, in a very certain ways, then they just reject it, and also sometimes protest it by doing totally something opposite. But here, I guess, our challenge in addressing the needs of those youth, presenting the message of Islam or spirituality or faith in more global terms, in more like big ideas, rather than very particular practices, very particular interpretations. Yes, Imam Azam can make an interpretation in certain particular part of the Islamic history, in particular geography, but it may not fit today's needs. It may not embrace today's needs. If Imam Azam lives today, probably he would interpret Islam very differently, in many ways. I guess if we just, instead of insisting on specific and very secondary, tertiary practices of Islam, we should focus the essential teachings of Islam and in a more universal, with a more universal and global language. So I guess if we make that and then connect them to those larger and big questions, and also respecting other interpretations of different traditions, probably youth will be more receptive to that sort of conversation.
Yeah. So we're actually running out of time, but if you are not tired, we have one more question. If you want, we can ask it.
Okay, let's get the last question then.
This is our last question, yes. So how do you consider reconciling Prophet Muhammad's, peace be upon him, humanity, and him being chosen the messenger of God?
His humanness and his messengerhood?
Yes.
How do you reconcile and combine them? That's the teaching of the prophetic, the Abrahamic traditions, or the especially Islamic theology, that throughout the human history, God revealed himself to certain persons, individuals, in a way that they see either as a vision, as a revelation, as a connection with those individuals. And in their lives, they exposed the way that Sufis describe that connection. When you put the iron on the fire, after a while you cannot differentiate the fire from the iron. Both of them are like very core, like those fire, as if both of them became like a fire. But if you just take it away and then let the iron cold, then its nature becomes iron, right? Again. But if you put it back again, you cannot separate them, right? Mm-hmm. So they describe the human relationship with God to this analogy. As you get closer to God, you just start feeling His presence. You just start kind of hearing those inspirations, those revelations, those kind of angelic moments that you enjoy, that hudur, which is the presence. But you are not fire, you are still iron, right? Not mixed with that iron and then the fire. So because when we just left alone with our nature, that iron thing comes out, right? So the challenge for us, like starting with the prophets, I guess they leave that connection in the highest level, but at the same time, they do not confuse with their ironness, humanness, with the divineness. So when they just become like the fire, they do not climb, well, I am fire. No, they say, I am still human. I am still iron. But I am just enjoying the presence of God, and I appreciate and praise God for letting me get closer to Him like this. So when I enjoy this connection, when I enjoy this encounter with God, I want to go back and invite people to this presence and invite them enjoy the same thing that I enjoy, which is the meaning of the prayer. Like when we do prayer, which is the miraj of the mu'min. But what does it mean? The Prophet Muhammad goes to the miraj, leaves that union, right? And after that union comes back to invite people to enjoy this connection. So when we do our prayer, we go to the miraj, we just stand in the presence of God, leaving that union, and after that we make, at the end of the prayer, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. What does it mean? People, I was in the presence of God. I just, totally enjoyed that presence. It was, awesome and then beautiful thing. And that felt so peaceful, which is the meaning of salam, right? I am filled with peace inside me, and they are just pouring everything, from my words and attitudes, and I just brought you this peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's just like you go and shopping and then, bought a lot of gifts, and you're just, throwing to the kid, this is your gift, this is your gift. That's the meaning of, 5 daily prayer. But the important feature of the prophets, when they feel that presence in its highest quality, they do not, come back and claim certain type of like superiority, types of like, oh, I am like a god or something. They are still humble, they are still servant of God, and you don't see any sign of that arrogance or other things in their attitudes. I guess that's, how I understand that, how they face the challenging of being selected by God to a very high position, but not using it and not being spoiled by that electedness and selectedness, and become drunk with that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Bilgin. It's been a very insightful talk. And
My pleasure.
Thank you. Dear audience, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Salam Islamic Center Weekly Seerah Series. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We hope to see you again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Enjoy your evening.